These are examples of activities that I would do with a kindergarten or preschool student. First, to help them practice writing numbers and to get a feel for organizing data and having multiple representations, we could work on creating tables. So in this one, I'm making a table that the student would say the number of items lost and the number of items found. And then we would collect 10 items and hide these in a small area so that they're easily found and it doesn't take too long. But 10 things, sort of like these types of items, I'd use them with Michaeli pretty frequently. And the student has to find exactly one at a time and then bring it back to update their table. So initially there would be 10 toys lost and 0 found. And then when they return to update their table one at a time, they'll have 9, 1, 8, 2, and get a feel for a lot of those pairs that combine to tens. It's also helpful for students to be able to recognize numbers really quickly. This is called subitizing. And subitizing is when we can see a number without actually having to count it. For example, the number of cubes in my hand, that red one doesn't show up well, but the number of cubes in my hand is 3, and we can see it without actually saying 1, 2, 3. These are 10 grids, or 10 frames, they're also called. And we could recognize the number of cubes on here without counting as well, and practice seeing 8 just because there's 2 missing squares in the 10. Other things would be recognizing shapes and paying attention to the characteristics that actually define a shape. I think a mistake that a lot of times happens with children is they get too used to just the prototypical shape. And by prototypical, for example, we could have a prototypical triangle like this. And if ever that triangle has a slightly different orientation, like looking tipped over, students don't recognize that as the same shape. So I would show students images of things that are not quite triangles. Here's a few examples. Something where it's not quite an enclosed shape because there's a gap, or a curved edge, or more than 3 sides. And students would need to be able to justify and reason through why that is or is not a triangle. They should also see different variations, skinnier ones, right triangles, etc. I've also practiced counting and counting by 2s or 5s or 10s. And one way that I've done this is to say a number and then the next student will respond. So, for example, I say 1, the student says 2. I say 3, the student says 4. I say 5, the student says 6. And that helps to get them a little bit more prepared for counting by 2s. Ultimately, it would be great for them to have a lot of skills with number composition and flexible thinking. I have a few card games similar to this where I would set out 4 cards, and with a student who has already mastered a lot of things that we just have talked about, I would want them to recognize a combination of 3 cards that could make a mathematical equation. So with the cards that I have here, there's a 9, 1, 8, and 3. And the student could recognize that 8 and 1 combined is 9.